Alrighty, so it's hard to believe we have now officially hit the halfway point as this week is match week number 17. And even though we're only 3 months into the new season, because of the fact that there is a League Cup that will pause the season for about a month, that means a lot of these games are basically playing in a rapid pace to a point where, yeah, it's hard to believe. We're already halfway into the season. And there's no doubt that I will definitely make an emotion index, I think, after this week. Kind of talk about how each of these teams feel as we hit the halfway point of the 2023 MLS regular season. Now, that being said, I am wearing LAFC, and I know LAFC is not playing in the league this week, but they are playing in the CCL second leg in that decisive CCL final second leg, which, I'm wearing their jersey just thinking that maybe that will bring them some good luck. Though, that being said, the opposite could be true for many people have said that every time when I wear a jersey of the team that I preview, it means that team is probably going to lose. And honestly, I've seen it before where times that has happened, but I've also seen where times that it hasn't happened, where the teams that I wear in the preview actually turns out to win. So that's basically up to you to decide whether you believe in that superstitious or not. But that being said, we do have 13 games that's going to be happening this week, with all of them happening on Saturday, though there's going to be two that's going to be matinee games, and then the rest of them are part of that busy Saturday night action that we will have tomorrow. So let's start with talk about the matinee games, and the first one is NYCFC versus New England, which will be 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 12:30 p.m. Pacific. In terms of the all-time meeting, the Revs still has the all-time meeting with a 10-6-8 record. NYCFC, it's been a disappointing season for them. Well, I would say it's been a disappointing, but kind of just a retooling season for them, really struggling in the league with a 4-4-7 record. While New England, they've been battling with some injuries concern in the past couple of weeks, but they at least stay afloat with a 7-5-3 record. Now, in the last 5 games, as I mentioned, for NYCFC, we know that they have had problems in terms of playing on the road, but it seems like that bad road form has started to seep into their home form too, because they lost the last two home game by a score of 3 goals to 1. First to FC Cincinnati, then to the Philadelphia Union. Then they drew 1-1 against Orlando, lost 1-0 against the Red Bulls in the New York Derby, and then losing 3-2 to Charlotte FC on the road. New England, well, these last 2 games, the Revs has been part of some crazy affairs where I think it's rare you see a team that has the last 2 games being back-to-back free draw. I mean, it was a free draw against Atlanta, a free draw against Chicago, a 3-0 loss to the Union, a 2-1 loss to Inter Miami, but they did win 2-0 against Toronto on the road. And again, they've been battling through injuries in these past couple weeks, especially on their attacking core. So yeah, it could be excusable why their performance have kind of dipped a little bit, but we'll see whether or not if they can bounce back in this one. And especially, it's not gonna be easy because NYCFC is desperate to try to get them their home form back. I mean, I will say that their home form kind of took a dip mainly because they just played two of the toughest team in the Eastern Conference, and in this game against a New England Revolution side that is having to deal with short rest, as it is the case for most of the team, but they've been dealing with injuries and short rest, and that's going to be even tough for teams to deal with just short rest, and especially for NYCFC, who's been pretty much been at home and haven't been have to travel outside of New York in these past couple of games. But that being said, moving on into the next one is my favorite rivalry in MLS, and I know El Tráfico and Hell is Real Derby has really grabbed its attention, but in terms of just the purest and just kind of a rivalry that I think has everything in terms of the history of this league. There's nothing that beats the Cascadia Derby between the Seattle Sounders versus the Portland Timbers. Now, coming into this game, I would also like to say that this is maybe a desperation derby for both of these team two. I mean, it's not often I say the word desperation derby in the Cascadia Derby, though that being said, maybe that is not exactly true because anytime when both of these teams play against each other, you know what the stake is, not just for the bragging rights, but also we've seen what a Cascadia Derby win can do team. They will have that incredible boost after the Derby win that can carry into the next couple of games, and both of these teams are definitely looking to trying to do so because the Sounders, they have been really struggling this season at home. 8-2-6. 3 of those 6 losses have come at home, which is very unsounders like. The Timbers 4-4-7, and it seems like their Cascadia Derby win that they got earlier this season, that boost kind of ran out in the last couple of games because they look absolutely terrible in these last couple of games. This game is a 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific, and of course, because it's a Cascadia Derby, you know it's going to be on national television. I was surprised that it was not last time when both of these teams met, but this one is. It's going to be on the Big Fox. All-time meeting 19, 18, and 6, or actually 19, 8, and 16 in favor of the Timbers. But in terms of the last 5 head-to-head matchup, well, ever since that embarrassing loss that the Timbers took in the hand of the Sounders at home, where they lost 6-2, they have took it personally in the last 4 head-to-head matchup because they have won all 4 of their last 4 head-to-head matchup to the Sounders. It was a 4-1 win against the Sounders last time both of these teams met. Then the Timbers won 2-1 against the Sounders, a 3-0 road win against the Sounders, a 2-0 road win against the Sounders, and then of course, as I mentioned, the aforementioned embarrassment, and you could say maybe the massacre of Providence Park with Seattle putting a 6 spot and winning 6-2 against the Portland Timbers. But like I said, this is a game that both of these teams would want to win. I mean, if you're Seattle, I know things have not look well for this team, but they at least are starting to get a little bit healthier. Though there is still question of when exactly Christian Rodon would make his impact, because I think it's safe to say that he is pretty much what holds the glue in terms of this attack, and you can clearly see with him not being there, that has taken a huge damper in terms of this attack. But they desperately need a win, consider the resort's not gone well. And then you got the Timbers. Again, things did not go so well for them either in the last game. But keep in mind, I don't think the Timbers actually play in the middle of the week, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong though. But yeah, they could be maybe the more fresher side coming into this game. And yeah, overall, should be a very interesting Cascadia Derby. I always love a good old Cascadia Derby. I mean, it's not going to be something crazy like what we see in Hell is Real and El Trafico, but it's definitely going to be one that there's going to be high stake, and both of their fan base are hoping that their team won't let them down and get the Cascadia Derby win in this one. That being said, moving on, we get to now the busy part of the schedule in terms of this match week number 17, where we get to the 7:30, 4:30 p.m. Eastern start. Though again, there or 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific start. Though when you look at this week, I think there's only like 5 of them that's taking place around 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, which is usually the busiest time of the Saturday night action. But we start off with FC Cincinnati taking on the Chicago Fire. Now Cincinnati, of course, leading the Supporter Shield standings with an 11-3-1 record, and are just on a historic pace right now in terms of points total. Like at the pace that they're on, they're gonna break the points total record that was set by New England back in 2021. Chicago 3-8-4 this season, and in terms of the all-time meeting, 3 wins for both of these teams and 4 draws. Last 5 games for Cincinnati, it was a 3-1 win on the road against NYCFC, a 1-0 road win against Colorado, a 3-2 home win against Columbus, a 3-0 home win against Montreal, and then a 2-1 home win against DC United. Yeah, this team is just fuego hot right now, FC Cincinnati. For Chicago, it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams. Then it was a pair of 3-3 draw that Chicago was involved in the hands of New England and also Atlanta United. Then or actually no, in that Atlanta game, I thought yeah, actually they did draw 3-3 in that one. I was thinking of the one earlier this season when Chicago played against Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But they also lost 2-1 to Charlotte, and then winning 1-0 against St. Louis. So again, the inconsistency from the Chicago Fire that I've mentioned many times, it seems like it's back for this team, and it's got to be frustrating if you're a Fire fan because of that, and also just the way this season they have just found some of the most painful way to basically lose or drop points. And in this one, yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of hope in this one. I mean, Cincinnati this season, they have been untouchable at home. They've won all 9 of their home game, and I won't be surprised it could be number 10 in this one with how hot they have been. But moving on, we got Columbus versus Charlotte. So this is an interesting one because it's between 2 teams that are kind of in the middle of the pack, and are just hobbling above the red line as we hit the halfway point. When you look at the standings for both conferences, it's very tight in terms of the standings, especially in the middle of the pack. And as I said, both of these teams, Columbus and Charlotte, seems to be in that part. Columbus with a 6-3-6 record, while Charlotte 6-3-7. All-time meeting. There's only been three prior meeting, as this is only the fourth meeting, with Charlotte winning the only time both of these teams met each other with a 1-2-0 record. Last five games for Columbus. Well, they did get a much-needed 3-2 win against the Rapids, because before that, it was not looking good for a Wilfred Nazi team. They lost 3-1 on the road to Nashville, lost 3-2 against Cincinnati in the MLS Derby. They did win 2-0 against the Galaxy, and then drew 2-2 against Orlando City. Well, for Charlotte, prior to that 1-0 loss that they suffer in the hands of the Union, I thought Charlotte has been playing very, very well lately. In fact, they were actually well, actually, they weren't on a four-game winning streak, but they were on a decent run where they won 1-0 on the road against the Galaxy. They did lose 2-1 to Nashville at home, but then they won 2-1 against Chicago, and then gone on the road and win 3-1 against Atlanta United. And consider how bad of a start of the season Charlotte has had. Christian Latanzio has definitely turned around this team and kind of almost flying under the radar. You don't hear a lot about Charlotte kind of started to turn their season around, but they're kind of quietly doing so, and we'll see whether that continue in this one against a Columbus Crew team that, when it comes to home form, that's going to be something that they are looking to try to keep it strong. I mean, this season so far, their home form has been pretty good. I mean, they've only lost once, I think, this season at home, but that's going to have to continue against a Charlotte side that, I think, as I mentioned before for in the review, whenever teams are playing Columbus right now, they're just going to simply sit back and try to hit on the transition, because that's what's the secret in terms of trying to breaking down this Crew team. We know Wilfred Nancy team play some wonderful soccer at time, but then they also play wonderful soccer, but kind of leave themselves a little bit too open at the back, and that's where teams have been able to capitalize, and we have seen that even in the last game against Colorado, in the game against Nashville, and especially in the game against FC Cincinnati. But moving on, we got Inter Miami versus DC United. So this is going to be an interesting one, because this is a matchup between a team that has a new interim head coach in Javier Morales, and anytime when you have a new interim head coach coming in, you're going to get the new head coach boost, and that's what Miami is going to get against DC in this one. Miami, of course, 5-0-10. They have the worst record of the Eastern Conference. In fact, they're the first team to reach double-digit loss this season. Hey, if you're a Sporting KC fan, you can't say that. Well, as bad as our season has been in the beginning, at least we didn't get to 10 losses, and I think Galaxy and TFC fans can agree with that too. But yeah, 5-0-10, while DC 5-5-6. In terms of the all-time meeting, 3-1-1 in favor of DC, and in the last five games, again, they were on a four-game losing streak. The game against the Red Bulls, where they lost 1-0, was the final straw for Phil Neville in charge of this team. But prior to that, they lost 1-0 on the road against Montreal, lost 3-1 at home against Orlando, lost 2-1 on the road against Nashville, and then they did win 2-1 against New England. Now for DC, they kind of are struggling a little bit in these last five games. It started to kind of found that inconsistency form that we saw in the beginning of the season. They drew 2-2 against Montreal, lost 2-1 on the road against Toronto. They did win 3-0 against the Galaxy, drew 0-0 against the Union, and then drawing 1-1 against Nashville. So again, on paper, when you look at some of the results, there are some good results in terms of them able to withstand them on in terms of playing some good teams. But then there's also some bad result, and that TFC loss on the road. Consider how much of a chaos that DC was facing against a Toronto FC side like that. That was a very bad loss on the road. And the same goes for the Montreal game, where they were leading 2-0, and then they just dropped points because they couldn't hold on to that lead and gave up two goals in a span of just 2 minutes. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. And again, I do favorite Miami in this one, mainly because every time when we see a new head coach boost. I mean, when you look at both the Red Bulls and Chicago, when they got their new head coaches, they won their first game, and they did relatively well in the first couple of games. And I think that's going to be the same case in this one. I think Miami is going to get that head coaching boost, but we'll see whether or not Is that going to be enough for them to get themselves back in playoff contention? Because the beauty about this season is that nobody is really out of it this year. I mean, when you look at the standings, it's still very tightly knit, and especially with the way that only 16 miss out on the playoffs. Well, that of course is the Eastern Conference in the West. Only five of them is going to miss out on the playoffs. Yeah, you're gonna really have to suck to miss out on the playoffs this season. So yeah, everybody is pretty much still in it as we speak. But moving on, we got the Red Bulls versus Orlando City. So all-time meeting 9-2-8 in favor of the Red Bulls, as the Red Bulls coming into this game with a 4-7-5 record, while Orlando has a 5-5-4 record. And speaking of the Red Bulls, this is a team that they kind of had that little head coach boost from Troy Lesnar, but it seems like it's kind of dropped off a little bit in terms of the recent uh result. Though they did get a big 1-0 win on the road against Miami, but they did lose 1-0 against Seattle. Then they won 2-1 against Montreal, drew 0-0 against Toronto, and then won 1-0 against NYCFC. That was the first game in charge for Troy Lesnar. For Orlando, they drew 1-1 against Atlanta, won 3-1 against Miami, but then they drew 1-1 against NYCFC, drew 2-2 against Orlando City, and then they lost 2-0 against Montreal. So again, that kind of form just kind of sums up this season for Orlando City. It's a very inconsistent team. You just don't know what you're gonna get with this team. So yeah, this should be interesting. And I would also say that don't be surprised this might be a very low scoring kind of affair, because both of these teams they they don't tend to play some high octane kind of offense so far for both of these teams. So don't be surprised this could be, if there is a game that could potentially be a 0-0, this might be the one to do so. But then again, every time I said that this season and the game didn't turn out to be 0-0 and there actually was some scoring. So, we'll see who of course will get a win. And again, both of these teams kind of like in mediocre range, though. If you're the Red Bulls, I think they're starting to get themselves back on track after a very slow start to the beginning of the season. Now, moving on, we got the Philadelphia Union versus Montreal. Now, this is a game that I think the Union is going to be heavily favorites, especially with the way that Montreal, they got that big Canadian Championship final game against Vancouver. They maybe think about resting some of their players in this game against the Union. But nevertheless, 6-1-8 is the record for Montreal, while Philly 8-3-4 as the all-time meeting. Montreal still leads the all-time meeting with a 10-9-8 record. And for the Union, again, besides FC Cincinnati, you got to say that they are also one of the hottest team in the league. Won 1-0 against Charlotte, won 3-1 on the road against NYCFC, won 3-0 at home against New England, drew 0-0 against DC, and then winning 2-1 on the road against the Colorado Rapids. In fact, they have now gone 8 games without loss, and that's gone all the way back to April 8th was the last time that they suffer a loss. And coincidentally, that loss was in the hands of FC Cincinnati. Montreal, they drew 2-2 against DC, then win 1-0 against Miami, then they lost 2-1 against Montreal, and then they lost 3-0 against Cincinnati, but before winning 2-0 against Toronto. So again, Montreal has kind of cooled off a little bit, but they have also got some big win, especially at home. Problem is, this game is not at home. And, so far this season, home form has been very strong. Road form has been a different story. And again, in a game where, for Montreal, I think even if they didn't have the Canadian Championship final to worry about, I didn't think Hearn Lasada, man, will stand a lot of chance against a really good Union team. But again, with the way that for Montreal, I know it's just the Canadian Championship final, but hey, that's a chance to win a trophy and have a chance to get yourself back in the CONCACAF Champions League. So I think Montreal will definitely take that more serious in terms of that game compared to this one, where it just feels like it's going to be an automatic out, especially against a red hot Union team. But moving on, we got Austin versus RSL. So you could argue this maybe could be a desperation derby, though. Austin did get a big win last week, and RSL again, they're they look like this season. It's been kind of a very roller coaster season for RSL. There's been times where they've been good, and then things going bad, and then things going good again, and then things have gone bad, at least in the last game when they lost to the Galaxy at home, which, yeah, that's not going to be a result that's going to make RSL fans very happy when they lose to a chaotic Galaxy team. And that loss put their record to 4-4-7, while Austin getting that win against Minnesota has pushed their record to 5-4-6, and this is going to be the first of, I believe, 4 games that's going to be starting at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. Yeah, we actually had a lot of games that's going to be starting in the Central Time Zone. But in terms of the all-time meeting, 3-1-2 in favor of Austin, and in the last 5 games, Austin got that big 2-1 win against Minnesota. But they did lose 2-1 against Houston before winning 1-0 against Toronto. They did win 2-1 against Seattle, and then they lost 1-0 on the road, or not on the road, but at home against FC Dallas. So lately, Austin has slowly kind of turned their season around a little bit, and again, a lot of that has to do with the fact that Dre Yusi is back in this team, and it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if he's going to go for the full 90. I mean, I don't expect that's going to be the case, consider how short of a week it is. But for RSL, they of course lost 3-2 against the Galaxy. But before that, things were kind of looking bright for this team. I mean, they got a 1-1 draw against Minnesota on the road, a 3-2 win on the road against Colorado. In fact, they beat Colorado twice, both in League and U.S. Open Cup play. They drew 0-0 to the Timbers, and then they lost 3-0 at home against LAFC. And that, again, just for this RSL team, it's been so up and down in terms of how things have. And, that loss in the middle of the week, that is gonna really sting, because now they're playing against an Austin team that's maybe started to figure out a little bit and started to get themselves back in to well, they're actually now in playoff contention, with them being just above the red line. But yeah, they're starting to figure out a little bit, and started to definitely play much better compared to that free fall that they had starting in April, that has gone all the way up to the middle of May. But that being said, I am now going to switch boards and looking at the last 5 games to wrap up match week number 17. So moving on, we got FC Dallas versus Nashville, and this is kind of an interesting one because this is the COVID Cup Derby. I mean, I feel like that should be the name of this one, because I remember back in the COVID pandemic, both of these teams were not allowed to participate in the MLS's back tournament because of just multiple COVID breakout that was happening from both of these teams, and they end up playing 3 times in that shortened season, which is kind of the most out of any team has played. So I just kind of would say that this is kind of like the COVID Cup, or the non-invitational MLS's back tournament club. But nevertheless, coming into this game, Dallas 6-5-4, while Nashville 8-4-3. And in terms of the all-time meeting, Nashville still has the advantage, 4-1-2 over FC Dallas. And in the last 5 games for Dallas, I mean, it's been kind of inconsistent in some way. I mean, they're inconsistent in terms of the fact that they still struggle playing on the road. They lost 2-1 to Sporting KC before drawing 1-1 against the Quakes, even though technically they should have lost that one if it wasn't for the Quakes doing their self-destructing mode like they've done throughout the season. They did drew 1-1 against Houston in a game that they once again let that game slip out of the hand because of the way that they were leading late in that one. They did win 2-1 against Vancouver before going on the road and win 1-0 against Austin, and I think that's like the only road win that they have so far this season. For Nashville, again, they're red hot right now. A 3-1 win against Columbus, a 2-1 road win against Charlotte, a 2-1 home win against Miami, a 1-1 draw between both of these, or 1-1 draw between them and DC, and then a 3-0 win against the Chicago Fire. So yeah, again, when you're facing a red hot Nashville team, I don't think someone might give Dallas a chance in this one. But I will say this: we have seen before where Dallas has been played very, very well, especially at home, and a lot of that has to do with the humidity and the heat in Texas, and especially with the way that Nashville has play a lot of games. Though I will say that Nashville didn't play in the middle of the week, which will give them advantage compared to Dallas that did play in the middle of the week. But nevertheless, this should be an interesting kind of matchup. And again, it's the non MLS's back tournament, COVID Cup Invitational, or whatever you want to call it. It's always interesting when both of these teams meet against each other. With that being said, moving on in the next match is Minnesota and Toronto FC. And boy, it's been a long time since I remember the Loons play against TFC. In fact, I actually found out that the last time Minnesota played against Toronto FC was all the way back in 2018. Yeah, it's been a while since both of these teams play against each other. But they'll meet each other in this one with the Loons 5-4-6, while TFC 3-8-5. And in terms of the all-time meeting, TFC does have the all-time meeting advantage with a 2-0-1 win over Minnesota. And what's kind of interesting when you look at those last three head-to-head meetings, those were some high-scoring affair. Like the last two meeting between both of these teams had a score that ends with 4 goals to 3. Now, obviously, I don't think that's going to be happening in this one because neither of these teams has been doing very well going forward in front of goal. But I can't imagine if that could be the case again because of how crazy these meetings has been. But in terms of the last 5 games for Minnesota, I mean, it's been it's kind of got a little bit better compared to the disastrous part of April and May that they had. And even in some of these games that they lost, like the one against Austin, it was kind of encouraging to see how good the attack was, but just kind of being a little bit unlucky in that one because of the post and both goals disallowed because of offside. But before that, they did drew 1-1 against RSL. They did win 1-0 on the road against the Timbers and finally got their first home win against Houston. And then they did lose 3-0 against Sporting KC on the road because that's what Minnesota does. I mean, it's almost a given. Whenever it's the regular season, they play Sporting KC on the road. It's an automatic out. For TFC, a 0-0 draw against Chicago, a 2-1 win against DC United. But before that, it was a 1-0 road loss to Austin, a 0-0 draw against the Red Bulls, and then a 2-0 loss against Montreal, which is kind of where it really started to hit rock bottom. Well, I wouldn't say rock bottom in terms of performance. The rock bottom part is probably coming into that TFC versus DC game where there's a lot of toxicity that was going on behind the scene, and there's to this day, I think there probably is still that toxicity that is behind the scenes, but nevertheless, for Minnesota, this is a big opportunity to get themselves the second home win. I mean, the home form I mentioned before, it has not been great whatsoever from this team. And, no, this is a game that, if they want to improve their home form, this has got to be a game that they need to win because it's one thing to, of course, continue to do well on the road, which I think Minnesota has done very well this season on the road. And again, going back to that Austin game, they were very unlucky not to get something out of that one, but it's just the home form that's been a problem, and let's just hope that it will be fixed in this game. And one thing that is also interesting about this one is that they mentioned that Reynoso would be on the game day roster. Now, I'm not quite sure if he's going to be substituted into this game. I mean, there's no chance he's going to be starting in this one. I wonder if he is going to come off the bench because of the way that we've been talking about how it feels like this team just missed that key pieces in terms of Reynoso being in that number 10 position, and that if he is going to be back, I'm interested to see how he's going to do in terms of fitness. I mean, I know for sure that with Reynoso back into the squad, it's not just going to magically solve the attack, but at least with his presence, it will definitely give a little bit more unison to what this team is their identity, because after all, this team is built for Reynoso. Reynoso is literally the centerpiece of this team, and that it's good the fact that he is getting very close of coming back, and he could be coming back as soon as in this game. But we'll see whether that is gonna be the case coming into this one. But moving on, in the next one, we got St. Louis versus the Houston Dynamo. So St. Louis, another team that have been on a bit of a good run lately with an 8-1-4 record against the Dynamo team with a 5-3-6 record. And there's one team that really wants to ignore what happened in the middle of the week. It would be the Houston Dynamo because that game for them between the Whitecaps. I mean, I don't want to say embarrassing was the right word, because when you actually watch the game, yes, on the scoreline it looks embarrassing, but when you watch the game, the Dynamo could have turned the script if they would have scored a couple of more goals in the first half to really change things. But alas, that of course was not the case, and it's not easy now that you have to go on the road to play against a St. Louis team that, like I said, they have had a lot of confidence in the last couple of games, winning 3-1 against Vancouver, winning 4-0 against Sporting KC. They did lose 1-0 on the road against Chicago. Then they did lose at home 2-1 before drawing 1-1 on the road, and this is part of the period when they kind of face a little bit of an adversity, and there's a question that, well, it looked like St. Louis great start to the season, and the incredible run that they had it started to come to an end, and these last 2 games just basically proven otherwise, with them continue to winning and continue to do what what gives fans kind of a little bit kicked off about St. Louis of the fact that how many breaks are they going to get with the way that it seems like back passes and bad mistake is always going to be capitalized by the St. Louis team. Now for the Dynamo, as I mentioned, the last game, one of the worst game in franchise history with them losing 6-2 to Vancouver. But before that, it was kind of positive. They won 2-1 against Austin. They did drew 1-1 on the road against Dallas. They did lose 1-0 against Minnesota, and then they lost 1-0 at home against Seattle. But we know that this is a team that play much better at home compared them on the road. And unfortunately, this game is on the road, so I guess maybe an automatic L for the Dynamo in this one. I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's not going to be easy to the good news is that they can at least brush that embarrassing loss against Vancouver behind, but the bad news is they get to play against a team that have been really good this season at home and has started to turn it up again. That is St. Louis City. But moving on, in the next match, we got Colorado versus the San Jose Earthquakes. So, I'll tell you what, as much as I know this seems like a winnable game for the Quakes because they're facing against a last place Rapids team. This is something that is always kind of be a little bit mind-boggling for me whenever I see the Quakes play against the Rapids, especially on the road. They cannot beat the Rapids when they're playing on the road. It doesn't matter if the Rapids are good or bad. They struggle when they play on the road against the Colorado Rapids. Now, again, I would also say that if there is a chance for the Rapids to finally get their first home win, which again they're the only team to have yet to got a home win this season, this is the time to do so against a team that they have so much good record against when they're playing at home. But nevertheless, it's a 2-6-8 record that the Rapids has had, and unfortunately, the Rapids. It seems like remember the good run of form that they kind of had after a disastrous start of the season. Yeah, that's kind of a change. I mean, it seems like they're starting to drop points again, whereas they face against a Quakes team that got incredibly lucky in that game against Seattle and somehow able to bounce back to improve their record back to 6-4-5. This is the only game that starts at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. All-time meeting 32, 18, and 26 in favor of the Quakes. This is one of the rare times that the Quakes are actually leading in the all-time meeting. But the last 5 games, yeah, it's not been pretty for the Rapids. They lost 3-2 on the road against Columbus, lost 1-0 against Cincinnati, lost 3-2 on at home against RSL, lost 4-0 against Atlanta, and then losing 2-1 at home against the Philadelphia Union. It's an absolute free fall that Robin Fraser team has done. And really, remember how I mentioned how good that this team is started to be in terms of their defensive structure when they stop leading in the early part of the season. That is all gone now. I mean, it feels like in the last couple of games they look like the team in the beginning of the season where they just look absolutely lost on both ends of the pitch. Now for the Quakes, as I mentioned, they got an incredibly lucky 1-0 win on the road against Seattle before drawing 1-1 against FC Dallas. Then they lost 2-1 against LAFC and then losing 2-1 against the Galaxy before winning 2-1 against LAFC. Again, it feels weird looking at this stretch where I mentioned how this is probably the most important stretch for the Quakes, and that this is where we're gonna find out, whether team is gonna be real or is this team just going to be like previous Quakes team when they're hitting to a pivotal point at tough part of the schedule, they just completely collapse. And right now, my answer is still kind of to be determined because every time I thought, oh, looks like this is the old Quakes, they did what they did in the last game, winning 1-0 against Seattle, which is something that this I haven't seen a Quakes team done that a lot. Well, actually, I say that they did do it in 2021, I believe, when they won 1-0 against Seattle on the road, but it just does not happen often. So it's interesting to see this team, and again, my doubt of this team is still going to be in terms of the inability to close out games. I mean, again, they got very lucky against Seattle. That is something they cannot keep doing throughout the season and expect that's going to work out for them. So, the Quakes does get the lead in this one. I hope Luchi Gonzalez doesn't just go full row heave mode and just kind of park the bus and hope for the best. And while this is a Rapids team that is struggling to score goals, the Quakes are also a team that just gifting teams points away with conceding late goals. Again, I think they still lead the league this season in terms of the amount of points that they drop past the 90-minute mark. And I even mentioned a couple of times with the Columbus Crew kind of uh, kind of well, not impression, but comparison that is, and it kind of is the case. So we'll see whether if the Quakes can sort it out, and whether or not if they finally can break this bad run of forms when they finally break. I wouldn't even say a bad run of form. It's more like a curse where it just feels like whenever the Quakes play against Colorado, it doesn't matter if Colorado is good or not. They simply cannot beat them at Dick's Sporting Goods Park. But moving on, in the last game, we got Vancouver versus Sporting KC. So this is the only 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific start. As Vancouver, their record is actually exactly at five wins, five draws, five losses. While Sporting KC 4-4-8, and Sporting KC they have started to become one of the hottest team in the Western Conference. And as I mentioned before, they actually have the most point out of any team that they were able to get in the month of May. Now, coming into this game, 12-5-8 in favor of Sporting KC in terms of the all-time meeting. And in the last five head-to-head meeting, I mean, I mentioned the 6-2 win that the Whitecaps had against Houston. Then they lose on the road 3-1 against Vancouver. But then they won 2-0 against Seattle before losing on the road 2-1 and then losing on the road 3-1. I mean, it's safe to say that this team does much better when they're playing at BC Place compared to when they're playing on the road. Whereas for Sporting KC, again, ever since that disastrous start to the season, they have played much better both at home and on the road. They won 2-1 against FC Dallas, won 4-1 against the Timbers. Now, they did lose 4-0 against Sporting KC, but I think that result is really an outlier of them playing much better because they got an impressive 1-1 draw against LAFC and then they won 3-0 against Minnesota. And if you even want to go back to the Seattle resort, they were able to win on the road against the Seattle Sounders, and that was kind of the game that finally ended the the historic bad start to the season of them not getting a win for the first 10 games of the season. And also I would like to say that knowing the fact that the Whitecaps, like I mentioned with Montreal, are playing the Canadian Championship final, I wonder if Vanni Sartini's mindset is not really going to be on this game, and rather he's going to put his full focus on the Canadian Championship game. And especially, I think that Canadian Championship game is going to be in Montreal, so I think they got a long travel ahead of them. Will Benny Sartini maybe rest some of his guys coming into this game against Sporting KC? I mean, it's a difficult decision because they are playing at home, which is something that they've been very good this season at home, and you don't want to just throw away a home game because of that. And especially against a Sporting KC team that's been red hot, and they have been able to go on the road and able to get resort against Vancouver at BC Place before. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting decision for Vanni Sartini, and I think this is probably even a more difficult decision for Vanni Sartini compared to Hernan Losada. I mean, for Hernan Losada, it's pretty obvious that they're just going to rest their guys coming into that game against the Union, knowing the fact that that game is pretty obvious that they might have no shot of winning, even if they put their best starting 11. This one is a little bit more difficult for Vanni Sartini, and we'll see what decision he's going to make, whether if he's going to keep his regular starter in this one, which I think during the time when they were battling the CONCACAF Champions League, Vanni Sartini really didn't change that much in terms of the start 11 and in terms of league plays. He's not really a guy that tends to like to rest players, so maybe this might be the case where he's just going to put his starters in this one and then put his starters once again for that Canadian Championship final. But there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of the preview of all of these games. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of these games. And as always, let me know in the comments your prediction for these 13 games that is going to happen in match week number 17. But yeah, until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys do like, smash the subscribe button. And yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.